Queen Vaethra stood alone on the observation deck of her palace, watching the endless sea of stars through the crystal walls. Her pale blue skin glowed faintly in the dim light, and her silver eyes reflected the distant galaxies like mirrors. She was beautiful by any species standard, tall and graceful, with flowing white hair that moved like water even when she stood still. But tonight, beauty meant nothing. Tonight she felt only dread. The message from the Galactic Council had arrived 3 days ago, but she had read it 100 times since then. Each reading made her stomach twist with disgust. The words were polite, wrapped in diplomatic language, but the meaning was clear. The Silurith Empire was dying. Their population had fallen by half in the last century. Their enemies circled like hungry predators, waiting for the final collapse. And the only way to save her people was to marry a human. Vaethra's hands tightened into fists at the thought. Humans. Of all the species in the galaxy, why did it have to be humans? She had grown up hearing stories about them, tales that made even the bravest Silurith warriors uncomfortable. Humans came from a death world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there for a single day. They ate the flesh of other creatures and thought nothing of it. They fought wars against each other for centuries before finally reaching the stars. They aged and died in what seemed like the blink of an eye, yet somehow this made them more dangerous, not less. They lived fast, fought hard, and feared nothing. The Terran Confederacy had grown powerful in recent decades. What began as a small collection of human colonies had expanded into an empire that rivaled the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They preferred trade and diplomacy. But everyone knew the truth beneath the smile. Humans were predators wearing the mask of friends. Cross them, and they would destroy everything you loved without hesitation. Now the Galactic Council wanted her to bind her dying empire to these monsters through marriage. A diplomatic union, they called it. A partnership for mutual benefit. But Vaethra knew what it really was. Surrender, her proud people, reduced to begging humans for protection. The door behind her slid open, and her chief advisor entered. Minister Kellen was old. His blue skin faded to gray, but his mind remained sharp. He had served her mother before her, and had guided Vaethra through the difficult early years of her reign. The Terran delegation has entered our system, Kellen said quietly. They will arrive within 6 hours. Vaethra did not turn around. How many ships? 1. A diplomatic vessel. No weapons detected. This surprised her. She had expected a fleet, a show of strength to remind her who held the power in this arrangement. Instead, they sent a single ship. Either they were fools, or they were so confident in their strength that they saw no need for displays. And the one they have chosen for me, she asked. What do we know about him? Kellen hesitated before answering. His name is Cole Bennett. He is a soldier, not a politician. He served in the border wars against the Kes Collective and was decorated several times for bravery. He was wounded in battle and walks with a limp that he has chosen not to repair. Beyond that, we know little. He is not famous among his people. He holds no political power. It seems an odd choice. Vaethra finally turned to face her advisor. They send me a crippled soldier? Is this meant to be an insult? I do not believe so, my queen. The humans consider this man a hero. Perhaps they believe his qualities will appeal to you. The qualities of a killer, Vaethra said coldly. That is all humans know how to be. Kellen bowed his head but said nothing. He knew better than to argue when she was in this mood. The hours passed slowly. Vaethra tried to prepare herself, choosing her formal robes, rehearsing the diplomatic phrases she would need to speak. But her heart was not in it. Every time she thought about standing beside a human, about binding her life to one of those creatures, she felt sick. When the Terran ship finally landed in the palace courtyard, she forced herself to watch from the balcony. The vessel was smaller than she expected, plain and functional without decoration. The ramp lowered, and a single figure walked out into the golden light of the Silurith sun. Cole Bennett was not what she had imagined. He was tall for a human, but not unusually so. His hair was dark brown, cut short in a military style, and his face was weathered from years of service. He wore a simple uniform, without medals or decorations, though she knew he had earned many. His eyes were the color of Earth's oceans, a blue-green that seemed out of place on such a supposedly violent creature. And yes, he walked with a limp, his left leg moving stiffly, though he did not let it slow him down. He looked up at her balcony, as if he somehow knew she was watching. Their eyes met across the distance, and Vaethra felt a strange chill run through her. There was no aggression in his gaze, no hunger or cruelty. He simply looked at her with calm curiosity, like a man studying something he did not yet understand. She forced herself to look away first. The formal reception was held in the great hall, surrounded by her advisors and guards. Cole entered alone, having refused an escort. He walked to the center of the room and bowed respectfully, the movement practiced but sincere. "Queen Vaethra," he said, his voice deeper than she expected. "Thank you for receiving me. I know this arrangement was not your choice. I want you to know it was not entirely mine either. But I am here because I believe our peoples can build something better together. I am not here to conquer you or control you. I am here to learn, to listen, and to serve whatever future we can create." Vaethra stared at him in silence. She had prepared a cold, formal response, words that would establish distance between them. But something in his tone made her hesitate. "You speak well for a soldier," she finally said. Cole smiled slightly. "Soldiers learn many things, Your Majesty. How to fight, how to survive, and sometimes how to find peace when the fighting is done." "I do not trust your people," Vaethra said bluntly. "I do not trust you." Cole nodded as if he had expected this. "I understand. Trust is earned, not given. I will earn yours if you allow me the chance." Vaethra dismissed him with a wave, and he was escorted to the guest quarters. But long after he left, she found herself thinking about his eyes and the strange calmness she had seen there. Perhaps he was simply a better liar than most humans. Or perhaps something else was happening here, something she did not yet understand. 3 weeks passed since Cole Bennett arrived at the Silurith Palace, and Queen Vaethra still did not know what to make of him. The diplomatic arrangement required them to spend time together each day. It was meant to help them build familiarity before the official ceremony. Vaethra had dreaded these sessions at first, expecting the human to reveal his true nature sooner or later. She watched him constantly, looking for signs of the violence her advisors had warned her about. But the signs never came. Instead, she found something far more confusing. Cole was quiet. He did not demand attention or try to dominate conversations. When they walked through the palace gardens together, he asked questions about the plants and listened carefully to her answers. When they ate meals together, he tried every Silurith dish without complaint, even the ones that made most other species gad. When she tested him with cold silences, he simply waited patiently, never pushing her to speak before she was ready. It irritated her more than open hostility would have. One morning, Vaethra rose earlier than usual, unable to sleep. She walked through the quiet palace halls and found herself drawn to the training courtyard, a space where her guards practiced combat. To her surprise, Cole was already there. He stood in the center of the courtyard, moving through a series of slow, deliberate exercises. His shirt was damp with sweat, and his injured leg trembled with effort, but he did not stop. He shifted from stance to stance, throwing punches and kicks at invisible enemies. his face tight with concentration. Vaithra watched from the shadows. She had seen warriors train before, but there was something different about the way Cole moved. He was not practicing for glory or show. He was fighting against his own body, forcing it to obey, despite its damage. Each movement looked painful, yet he continued anyway. When he finally finished, he stood still for a long moment, breathing heavily. Then he noticed her standing there. "Your Majesty," he said, wiping his face with a cloth. "I apologize if I disturbed you." "You did not," she replied, stepping into the light. "Why do you do this? Your body is clearly damaged. Why push it so hard?" Cole looked down at his leg. "Because the moment I stop pushing is the moment I accept defeat. I have seen too many soldiers give up after injury. They convince themselves they cannot recover, and eventually they are right. I refuse to be one of them." Vaithra studied him carefully. "Your people have advanced medicine. They could repair your leg completely. Why choose to suffer?" This question seemed to strike deeper than she expected. Cole was quiet for several seconds before answering. "I could have had it fixed," he admitted. "The doctors offered many times. But this leg is not just an injury. It is a reminder." He paused, his eyes growing distant. "I was leading a squad during the border wars. We were ambushed by Keth forces in a canyon. Most of my people did not survive. I took a plasma round to the leg while trying to drag a young soldier to safety. She died in my arms." Vaithra felt something shift in her chest, an unfamiliar tightness. "And the leg reminds you of her?" "It reminds me of all of them," Cole said. "The ones who trusted me, the ones I could not save. Every morning when I feel the pain, I remember them. I carry their weight so I never forget what war truly costs." Vaithra did not know how to respond. She had expected humans to glorify their battles, to celebrate their violence. Instead, this man spoke of war like a wound that never healed. He mourned his fallen soldiers, the same way a Silurith queen would mourn her subjects. The days that followed brought more surprises. Vaithra discovered that Cole spent his evenings in the palace library, studying Silurith history and culture. He was learning their language, phrase by phrase, stumbling over the musical tones, but refusing to give up. When she asked why he bothered, he simply said that understanding someone begins with speaking their words. She also discovered his habit of sketching. He carried a small notebook wherever he went, filled with drawings of the palace gardens, the bioluminescent flowers, the alien creatures that lived in the royal ponds. His art was rough but honest, capturing the beauty of things without pretending they were something they were not. One evening, she found him sitting alone by the crystal fountain in the central garden. The twin moons had risen, casting silver light across the water. He was sketching again, his face peaceful in a way she rarely saw. "You find beauty here," she said, sitting beside him without asking permission. Cole looked up, surprised by her presence, but not unhappy about it. "Your world is beautiful, Your Majesty. I would have to be blind not to see it. Most humans who visit seem more interested in our resources and strategic position." "Most humans are fools," Cole replied simply. "They see the galaxy as something to conquer, instead of something to understand. I learned long ago that the universe offers more than we can ever take. The wise approach is to appreciate what it gives us." Vaithra was silent for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her for weeks. "Why did you agree to this arrangement, Cole Bennett? You are a soldier, a hero to your people. You could have refused. Why bind yourself to an alien queen who fears and distrusts you?" Cole set down his notebook and looked at her directly. His eyes reflected the moonlight, making them seem almost silver. "Because I believe in second chances," he said, "for people and for civilizations. Your empire is dying, Vaithra. My people could have let it fall and picked through the remains. That is what empires usually do. But some of us believe there is another way. We believe that strength means helping others survive, not crushing them beneath our boots. And you? Vaithra pressed. What do you believe? I believe that you are not my enemy, Cole said softly. I believe that fear is a prison, and the only way out is to take a chance on someone different. I am taking that chance on you, Your Majesty. All I ask is that someday you consider taking the same chance on me. He returned to his sketching, and Vaithra sat beside him in silence, watching the moons rise higher into the sky. She did not trust him yet. The walls around her heart were too strong to fall so quickly. But for the first time since his arrival, she began to wonder if those walls might someday crack. The attack came without warning on a quiet evening, when the palace had settled into its nightly routines and the guards had grown comfortable in their patterns. Queen Vaithra was walking with Cole through the eastern gallery, a long corridor lined with portraits of her ancestors. They had been discussing Silurith history, and Cole had been asking thoughtful questions about the queens who came before her. Vaithra found herself speaking more openly than usual, sharing stories her mother had told her as a child. She did not notice how comfortable she had become in his presence until it was too late. The first sign of danger was a flicker of movement in the shadows ahead. Cole stopped walking instantly, his body shifting into a stance Vaithra recognized from his morning training. His hand moved to his hip, reaching for a weapon that was not there. Humans were not permitted to carry weapons in the royal palace. "Get behind me," he said quietly. Vaithra wanted to argue that she was the queen and did not take orders from anyone. But something in his voice stopped her. It was not a command. It was a warning from someone who had seen death before and recognized its approach. The shadows came alive. 3 figures emerged from hidden alcoves, moving with the fluid grace of trained assassins. They wore black armor that absorbed light, and their faces were covered by masks shaped like skulls. In their hands, they carried plasma blades that hummed with deadly energy. Vaithra's blood ran cold. She knew these symbols. The Void Syndicate. Silurith extremists who believed death was better than alliance with humans. They had threatened her before, but she never imagined they would strike inside her own palace. "The human dies first," one of them hissed in Silurith. Then the traitor queen. Cole did not understand the words, but he understood the intent. He stepped forward to meet the first attacker, moving faster than Vaithra thought his injured body could allow. What followed was violence unlike anything she had witnessed. The assassins expected easy prey, a crippled human without weapons. But what they found was something far more dangerous. Cole caught the first blade strike on his forearm, letting the plasma burn through his sleeve to his flesh. But instead of falling back in pain, he used the contact to pull the assassin off balance, slamming his elbow into the skull mask with bone-cracking force. The assassin dropped. Cole took his blade. Now armed, he became something terrifying. He did not fight with rage or wild aggression. He fought with cold precision, each movement calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum waste. He parried the second assassin's strike and drove the blade through the gap in their armor. He spun to face the third, limping badly now but refusing to fall. The third assassin was smarter than the others. He circled around, trying to reach Vaithra, while Cole was occupied. But Cole had anticipated this. He threw the plasma blade with perfect accuracy, catching the assassin in the shoulder and spinning him around. Before the attacker could recover, Cole was on him, using his bare hands to finish what the blade had started. Silence fell over the gallery. 3 bodies lay on the ground. Cole stood among them, bleeding from multiple wounds, his breathing heavy and ragged. But his eyes remained focused, scanning the shadows for additional threats. "Are there more?" he asked, his voice strained. Vaithra could not speak. She had never seen anything like what she had just witnessed. This was the human violence she had feared, the predator instinct that made other species tremble. But it had not been directed at her. It had been directed at her enemies, unleashed in her defense. Palace guards finally arrived, flooding the corridor with weapons drawn. They stopped in shock at the sight of the fallen assassins, and the wounded humans standing over them. "Secure the queen," Cole ordered, as if he had the authority to command her guards. Strangely, they obeyed without hesitation. Perhaps they sensed what Vaethra was only beginning to understand. In that moment, Cole Bennett was the most dangerous thing in the palace, and he had chosen to protect them. Medical teams rushed to treat his wounds. The plasma burns were severe, and he had taken a blade cut across his ribs that should have dropped him minutes ago. Yet he remained standing, refusing treatment until he was certain Vaethra was safe. "Why?" she demanded, her voice finally returning. "You had no weapon. You were outnumbered. You could have fled through the side passages. Why risk your life?" Cole looked at her with those strange ocean-colored eyes. Blood trickled down his face from a cut on his forehead, but he seemed unaware of it. "Because running would have left you alone with them," he said simply. "I do not abandon people who need me, ever." "I am not your people," Vaethra said. "I am not even your species. You owe me nothing." "You are wrong," Cole replied. His voice was growing weaker now, the adrenaline fading and the pain catching up with him. "From the moment I accepted this mission, your fate became tied to mine. Your enemies became my enemies. Your survival became my purpose." He swayed slightly, and the medics caught him before he could fall. "I do not need to owe you something, Vaethra. I chose to protect you. That is enough." He collapsed into the arms of the medical team, unconscious from blood loss and exhaustion. Vaethra stood frozen in the corridor, surrounded by bodies and guards and chaos. Her mind kept replaying what she had seen. A human, unarmed and injured, facing 3 armed assassins without hesitation. Not for glory or reward or political advantage, simply because she was in danger and he was able to help. Everything she believed about humans had just been shattered, and she did not know how to rebuild her understanding of the universe. The guards looked to her for orders, but she had none to give. She simply watched as they carried Cole away to the medical wing, his blood leaving a trail on the polished floor. For the first time in her life, Queen Vaethra of the Silurith Empire did not know what to think or feel. All she knew was that a human had nearly died for her, and she could not explain why that mattered so much. Cole Bennett hovered between life and death for 6 long days, and Queen Vaethra spent every night at his bedside. She told herself it was duty. He had saved her life, and honor demanded she acknowledge the debt. But as the hours stretched into days, she began to admit the truth. It was not duty that kept her in that small medical room. It was something deeper, something she did not have words for yet. The Silurith doctors worked constantly, but human physiology was strange and unpredictable. Their bodies healed differently, fighting against treatments that worked perfectly on other species. Cole's immune system attacked the regeneration compounds as if they were poisons. His cells refused to cooperate with accelerated healing. It was as if his entire body was at war with itself, too stubborn to simply accept help. "Typical human," the lead physician muttered on the 3rd day. "Even unconscious, he resists." Vaethra sat in a chair beside his bed, watching his face. The wounds were bandaged now, but she could still see the burn marks creeping up his arm, the dark bruising across his ribs. He looked smaller like this, fragile in a way he never seemed while awake. Yet even in his sleep, his hands sometimes clenched into fists, as if ready to fight enemies that existed only in his dreams. To pass the time, she read his service records. The Terran Confederacy had sent them when she requested more information, and what she found changed everything she thought she knew about Cole Bennett. He had joined the military at 17, lying about his age to enlist early. His father had been a soldier who died in combat, and Cole had wanted to follow the same path. But unlike the bloodthirsty warriors of legend, Cole had quickly earned a different reputation. He was the soldier who protected civilians when orders said to ignore them. He was the officer who refused to execute prisoners when commanders demanded it. He had been demoted twice for disobeying direct orders, both times because those orders would have caused innocent deaths. The border wars had made him famous among the common soldiers, though the generals rarely mentioned his name. During a brutal campaign against the Keth Collective, Cole had led a mission to evacuate an alien colony that his own forces were about to bomb. He had no authorization, no support, and no guarantee of success. He simply gathered volunteers and went anyway. They saved over 3,000 Keth civilians that day. Cole received his worst wounds in that mission, including the leg injury he still carried. When the war ended, the Terran government had quietly offered him a medal and a comfortable retirement. Instead, he had requested assignment to the most difficult diplomatic posting available, the marriage alliance with the Silurith Empire. The records did not say, but Vaethra was beginning to understand. On the fourth night, she spoke to him even though he could not hear. "I thought your people were monsters," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "All my life, I heard stories of human violence. The wars you fought against each other, the weapons you created, the way you spread across the galaxy like a disease, consuming everything in your path." She paused, looking at his still face. "But you are not a monster, Cole Bennett. You are something I do not understand, a creature of violence, who chooses peace. A warrior who carries his scars as reminders of those he could not save. A soldier who volunteered to marry an alien queen because he believed it might prevent another war." Her voice cracked slightly, and she forced herself to continue. "I do not know what to do with you. I was prepared to hate you. Hatred is simple. It does not require thought or effort. You simply look at someone and see an enemy. But you have made hatred impossible. Every time I look at you, I see the man who stood between me and death without hesitation. I see the man who bleeds and struggles and refuses to give up." She reached out and touched his hand gently. His skin was warm, warmer than Silurith flesh. She could feel his pulse beating beneath the surface, stubborn and steady. "Wake up," she whispered. "Wake up and tell me what I am supposed to feel, because I do not know anymore." On the sixth day, the doctors reported that Cole's condition had stabilized. His body had finally stopped fighting the treatments, and the healing had begun. They expected him to wake within hours. Vaethra was there when his eyes opened. At first, he seemed confused, staring at the ceiling without recognition. Then his gaze shifted to her, and something changed in his expression. Not surprise exactly, but something softer. "You are still here," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I am," Vaethra replied. "You saved my life. A debt is owed." Cole smiled weakly. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less burdened. "I did not do it for debt," he said. "I did it because some things are worth protecting. You are worth protecting, Vaethra. Your people, your culture, your future, all of it matters." "Why?" she asked. The question had been burning inside her for days. "We are strangers. We are different species. Why would you nearly die for someone you barely know?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he finally answered, his voice was serious. "Because I have seen what happens when good people do nothing. I have watched worlds burn because soldiers followed orders instead of their hearts. I have buried friends who died fighting for causes that were not worth their sacrifice. When I saw those assassins coming for you, I had a choice. I could calculate the risks and decide you were not worth dying for. Or I could act like the person I want to be, someone who protects others, regardless of the cost. Vaithra felt tears forming in her eyes, an unusual sensation for her species. She blinked them away quickly. "And if you had died?" she asked. "Then I would have died being who I truly am," Cole replied. "That is the only death worth having." He reached out and took her hand, the same way she had touched his during the long nights of waiting. His grip was weak but warm. "I am not asking you to love me, Vaithra. I am not even asking you to trust me yet. But I am asking you to give us a chance, to see what we might become together, if we both choose to try." Vaithra looked at their joined hands, human and Silurith, so different, yet somehow connected. The walls around her heart did not fall completely. They were too old and too strong for that. But for the first time, she felt them crack. "I will try," she said quietly. "That is all I can promise." Cole smiled again, and despite his wounds and exhaustion, it was the most genuine expression she had ever seen on any face. "That is enough," he said. "That is more than enough." The assassination attempt changed everything. Within days of Cole's recovery, the Silurith Empire was transformed by a wave of emotion that no one had expected. Word spread quickly about what had happened in the Eastern Gallery. A human, unarmed and injured, had fought 3 trained assassins to protect the Queen. He had nearly died in her defense. He had asked for nothing in return. The story grew with each telling, until it became legend, passed from city to city and world to world across the empire. For generations, the Silurith had been taught to fear humans. Now they were forced to question everything they believed. If humans were truly monsters, why had this one risked his life for an alien queen? If humans cared only about conquest, why had Cole Bennett chosen protection over escape? The Council of Houses demanded answers. They gathered in the Great Chamber, the most powerful nobles in the empire, each one suspicious of the human presence among them. Vaithra stood before them, dressed in the ceremonial robes of her ancestors, and spoke words she never imagined she would say. "I called you here to discuss the alliance with the Terran Confederacy," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Many of you opposed this arrangement from the start. You believed we were surrendering to predators, inviting wolves into our home. I shared those fears. I looked at the human they sent me and saw everything our stories warned us about." She paused, letting the silence fill the chamber. "I was wrong." Murmurs spread through the council, but Vaithra raised her hand for silence. "Cole Bennett is a soldier. He has fought battles and killed enemies. He carries scars from wars we cannot imagine. By every measure, he should be the monster we expected. But he is not." Her voice grew stronger. "When assassins came for my life, he did not hesitate. He did not calculate whether saving me was worth the risk. He simply acted, placing his body between me and death because that is who he is." She looked across the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. "I have spent weeks studying him, watching him, waiting for him to reveal his true nature. What I found was not a predator in disguise. I found a man who learns our language because he respects our culture. A man who sketches our flowers because he finds them beautiful. A man who exercises every morning despite his pain because he refuses to surrender to weakness. I found someone who believes that strength means protecting others, not destroying them." She stepped forward, her presence commanding the attention of every noble in the room. "The Terran Confederacy did not send us a conqueror. They sent us a guardian. And I have decided to accept him not as a political necessity, but as a partner worthy of respect." Some nobles protested loudly, unwilling to abandon their hatred of humans. Others sat in thoughtful silence, reconsidering beliefs they had held their entire lives. But Vaithra stood firm through it all, answering questions and challenges with the same calm certainty that Cole had shown her. By the end of the session, the council had voted. The alliance would proceed, not as a surrender, but as a true partnership between equals. The wedding ceremony was held 1 month later, broadcast across both empires to billions of watching eyes. The palace gardens were transformed into a celebration unlike anything the Silarith had ever seen, blending traditions from two civilizations into something entirely new. Cole stood at the altar, in a uniform specially designed for the occasion, half Terran military and half Silarith formal wear. He still walked with his limp, refusing to hide the injury that had become part of his identity. But he stood straight and proud, his eyes fixed on the path where Vaethra would appear. When she emerged from the palace, the gathered crowd fell silent. She wore robes of silver and gold, her white hair flowing like starlight, her blue skin glowing with an inner radiance. She was beautiful beyond words, but what struck Cole most was her expression. For the first time since he had known her, she was smiling. She walked toward him slowly, each step deliberate and certain. When she reached the altar, she took his hand without hesitation. "I was afraid of you," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "I was afraid of what you represented and what you might become. But I am not afraid anymore." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "What changed?" "You showed me what humanity truly means," Vaethra replied. "Not the species, but the quality. The choice to be kind when cruelty is easier. The decision to protect when running is safer. You taught me that strength and gentleness are not opposites. They are partners, like we are meant to be." The ceremony proceeded. Ancient words spoken in both languages, rituals performed that had never been shared between species before. When the final vows were exchanged, Cole leaned forward and kissed Vaethra gently, a human custom she had agreed to include. The touch was soft and warm, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with temperature. The crowd erupted in celebration. Silarith and human delegates cheered together, their voices mixing in a harmony that would have been impossible just months ago. In the years that followed, historians would mark this day as the beginning of a new era. The Silarith-Terran alliance became the foundation for lasting peace between two civilizations, a partnership built not on fear or necessity, but on genuine respect and understanding. Trade flourished. Cultural exchanges transformed both peoples. Wars that had seemed inevitable were avoided through cooperation and trust. And when those historians asked how it all began, the answer was always the same. A queen who feared humans learned to see past her prejudice. A soldier who carried the weight of war chose to fight for peace instead. They met as strangers, expected to hate each other, and discovered something far more powerful. They discovered that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. They discovered that enemies can become partners when both sides choose to try. And they discovered that the greatest strength in the universe is not the power to destroy, but the will to protect. Cole Bennett, the wounded soldier from a death world, changed the fate of an alien queen. And in doing so, he changed the fate of two empires. Their story became legend, told across 1,000 worlds to generations yet unborn. It was a story of fear transformed into trust, of hatred melting into love, of two people who should have been enemies becoming the greatest allies the galaxy had ever known. And whenever children asked what made humans special, their parents would smile and tell them the truth. Humans were not special because of their strength, or their technology, or their ambition. Humans were special because of their stubborn, impossible, beautiful insistence on being kind when kindness seemed foolish, on protecting others when protection seemed hopeless, on believing in second chances when the universe offered none. That was humanity. That was Cole Bennett. And that was why Vaethra, queen of the Silarith Empire, was proud to call herself his partner for the rest of her days.